They called him a monster dog at the auction, a creature too wild and uncontrollable to be tamed. But then, something miraculous happened. A young boy stepped forward, and when he gently touched the dog's forehead, the impossible occurred. What happened next will leave you speechless. Titan wasn't always known as the dog who would capture hearts. In fact, when he was brought to the auction, he was far from anyone's idea of a lovable pet. He was a massive German shepherd, his coat thick and matted, eyes full of distrust and fear. His past was clouded in mystery, but it was clear he had been through something no dog should ever endure. People called him a monster, a dog too wild, too angry to be domesticated. His growls and sharp barks sent everyone in the auction hall into nervous whispers. And as soon as his name was called, people would turn their heads and avoid eye contact. The auctioneer, his voice hoarse from too many failed attempts to sell dogs no one wanted, tried to hype up Titan's potential, but it was hard to sell hope. When the dog stood there like a ticking time bomb, Titan didn't respond to offers of food or water. He barely reacted to anything except when someone came too close. He would snap and growl, a warning nobody wanted to test that it wasn't that. Titan didn't have a heart. It was that it had been broken and stitched back together too many times. He was a dog who had been let down. And, in that moment, it seemed he was about to be left behind again. Ethan was just a quiet, unassuming boy of 8. But there was something about him that people often noticed, his deep connection with animals. While other kids ran around with their noisy, excitable energy, Ethan was calm and patient, always taking his time to understand the animals around him. Growing up on a small farm, he had spent his life surrounded by animals of all kinds, and over the years, he'd learned how to read them, what they needed, how they felt. When he heard about the auction, he knew he had to go. His parents had warned him that it might be a tough place to visit. Sometimes animals were treated poorly, and the environment was chaotic. But Ethan didn't mind. He was determined to help however he could. He had heard rumors about the monster dog at the auction, the one that no one wanted. He didn't know what kind of dog Titan was, but he knew what it felt like to be misunderstood, to be judged before anyone truly got to know you. As he stepped through the auction hall, the bustling noise surrounded him, but Ethan's eyes were locked on one dog, standing alone and still in the back of the room. There, in the corner, was Titan, his dark eyes filled with suspicion, yet somehow there was a spark of something more, a flicker of hope, just waiting to be seen. Ethan felt an immediate pull. Something told him this was no monster. This was a dog in need of a chance. Bidders were shouting, dogs were barking, and the noise seemed to swallow everything in sight. But the moment Titan was brought to the front, everything went still, like the room collectively held its breath. The auctioneer tried to warm up the crowd, calling out to anyone who might be interested in Titan, but the dog's posture spoke louder than words. Titan stood rigid, his eyes scanning the crowd, ears flat against his head. The few brave souls who dared to look at him quickly turned away. People murmured in the back, "Look at those eyes, too wild. He's not a dog, he's a monster. I've heard about him. Aggressive, untrustworthy." The auctioneer's voice grew louder, trying to ignore the obvious tension in the air. "This is a strong dog, very protective. He could be a great working animal, perfect for guarding or protection," the auctioneer said, but his words felt hollow. No one was buying it. Every time Titan let out a low growl or bared his teeth, potential bidders shrank back. The dog's reputation had preceded him. Fear surrounded Titan like an invisible barrier, and the once hopeful room turned into a sea of doubts and whispers. Ethan, who had been standing quietly in the back, felt his chest tighten with every rejection. The crowd's fear wasn't just for Titan, it was for the unknown. But to Ethan, the dog's behavior wasn't that of a monster. It was a dog who had been hurt, who had learned to protect himself from a world that only saw his rough edges. The auctioneer's voice cut through the air once more, but Ethan's heart was set. He had to see this dog for himself. Ethan's feet moved before his mind could catch up. He took slow, careful steps toward the pen where Titan stood, still as a statue, his eyes watching everyone around him with distrust. The auction hall felt chaotic, but everything around Ethan seemed to fade into a soft hum, as though the world had slowed down. He approached Titan, not with the eagerness of a child who wanted a dog, but with the quiet empathy of someone who understood. Titan's body tensed the moment Ethan came into his view. His ears flattened against his head, and a low growl rumbled deep in his chest. But Ethan didn't back away. He kept his movements gentle, his hands relaxed at his sides, as though he were talking to a frightened animal, not a monster. Titan's eyes narrowed as Ethan took another step forward. "It's okay," Ethan whispered, his voice soft yet unwavering. "I'm not here to hurt you." The room around them seemed to hold its breath. People watched in disbelief as the boy continued to walk slowly toward Titan, despite the dog's growls. He knelt down at the edge of the pen, his hands still open and unthreatening. Titan's growls softened, just a little, and he took a hesitant step forward. Ethan smiled faintly, giving him time to process. "I'm not going to hurt you," he repeated, his words full of calmness. And then, as if the whole room had been holding its breath, Ethan reached his hand out. It hovered for a moment, and Titan's eyes locked onto it, full of suspicion. But Ethan didn't move. He stayed still, showing Titan that he wasn't rushing. And slowly, Titan's lips parted, the growl quieting into something softer, almost like a sigh. With a trembling paw, Titan reached out, his nose brushing Ethan's hand. The connection was electric, an unspoken understanding that felt like it could change everything. And just like that, the monster dog began to soften. Ethan visited Titan every day after school, each day spending a little more time with him, a little closer. At first, Titan was still wary. He wouldn't approach Ethan on his own, but he'd watch him with those deep, haunted eyes, silently sizing him up. It wasn't easy. The scars of his past were too deep to fade quickly. But Ethan didn't mind the slow pace. He knew healing took time, and he was willing to be patient. Gradually, Titan began to trust him more. Ethan would sit on the ground, near Titan's pen, speaking softly to him, recounting stories of his day, as if Titan were a friend who just needed someone to listen. At first, Titan only watched, his posture tense, but over time, he began to inch closer, inch by inch, until one day, he finally laid down beside the fence, watching Ethan with a cautious curiosity. The real breakthrough came one afternoon when Ethan brought a toy, a simple ball he rolled gently towards Titan. The dog stood, still hesitant, but instead of backing away, he sniffed the ball cautiously, then nudged it with his nose. Ethan's heart soared as the dog pushed the ball closer to him. And that simple action was a small but powerful sign of trust. It wasn't just the ball that changed. Titan's entire demeanor softened. The snarls turned into quiet grumbles, and the growls became low whines for attention. Slowly, the once monster dog began to show the gentler side that had been buried under layers of fear and pain. Ethan continued to visit, and with each passing day, Titan seemed to shed more of the armor he had built around himself. Every small victory, whether it was a wag of the tail, a nudge of the nose, or a soft glance, was proof that the dog wasn't a monster. He was simply a soul who had been broken, waiting for someone to put the pieces back together. And Ethan, with his quiet patience, was the one to do it. A few weeks had passed, and Titan's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The boy and the dog had come a long way. Titan was no longer the snarling, defensive creature he had once been at the auction. But there was one moment that would test whether all of the progress they had made together would be enough. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the test came. Ethan had taken Titan to a local park, a place they had visited a few times before. Titan, although still a little wary of strangers, had been doing better with other dogs. But today, the park was busy, and a group of energetic dogs ran past them, barking excitedly.